Humble woman shows a pendant to the judge. He hugs her in tears. Amanda Johnson entered the courtroom with trembling hands and a racing heart. At 25, she had never imagined she would one day be there, before the most feared judge in New York, pleading for justice. The reason that had brought her there was desperate. Her home in the Brooklyn Heights neighborhood, where she had lived with her sick grandmother since she was 15, was being taken over by a company that claimed to have documents proving ownership of the land. The construction company wanted to tear everything down to build a luxury apartment building, and Amanda only had a few old yellowed papers that her grandmother kept in an old tin. Judge Richard Anthony Miller looked up as she approached the bench. Known for his severity and quick decisions, he had already reviewed the case on paper, and everything indicated the company was in the right. The young woman's documents seemed fake, or at least inadequate, to prove ownership of the property. "Mrs. Johnson," said the judge in a firm voice, "your documents are not sufficient to prove the legitimacy of your claim. The company has presented a deed registered with the county." Amanda felt tears well up in her eyes. It was all she had in the world. The simple little house where she grew up, where she cared for her grandmother Dorothy, who raised her alone after her parents died in an accident when she was just 3 years old. "Your Honor," she began, her voice choked, "I know my papers aren't the best, but this house is all I have. My grandmother has lived there for over 40 years. She is very sick and cannot move." The construction company's lawyer, a man in an expensive suit with an impatient air, tapped his fingers on the table. "Your Honor, this is a waste of time. The documents are clear. The company acquired the land legally and needs to begin construction." The judge sighed, ready to deliver the ruling. Cases like this were common, and as much as he felt sorry for ordinary people, the law had to be followed. But something in the young woman's desperate expression touched him in a strange way. "Do you have any other evidence? Anything that could help your defense?" he asked in one last attempt to help. Amanda fumbled in the old cloth bag she carried. She remembered something her grandmother always said. "When all seems lost, show this. It's our only hope." She took out a small, delicate silver pendant shaped like a heart, with an engraving almost faded by time. "This is all I have," she said, placing the pendant on the judge's desk. "My grandmother said that one day this might help me. She never really explained what it meant." Judge Richard picked up the pendant curiously, but the moment his fingers touched the metal and he saw the engraving, his world collapsed. His hands began to tremble uncontrollably. The pendant slipped from his fingers, falling onto the papers scattered on the desk. Tears sprang from his eyes before he could control them. His heart raced in a way it hadn't for over 20 years. He immediately recognized the small, almost faded engraving. "To my little star, Daddy Richard." "My God," he murmured, barely able to breathe. The company's lawyer stood up, irritated. "What is happening here? Can we proceed with the hearing?" But the judge didn't even hear him. His eyes were fixed on Amanda, analyzing every feature of her face, the shape of her eyes, the line of her nose, the way she tilted her head when she was nervous. He had seen it all before, a long time ago, in a small child who played on his lap. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Where did you get this pendant?" asked Richard with a broken voice. Amanda was confused by the judge's unexpected reaction. She expected severity, not tears. "My grandmother gave it to me when I was a child. She said it belonged to my parents before the accident. I've always carried it with me, but I never understood what was written on it. The letters are very faded." Richard squeezed his eyes shut. The memories came like a painful avalanche. 22 years ago, he had given that pendant to his daughter Jennifer on her 3rd birthday. It was a special gift, custom made for her, with the engraving, "For my little star, Daddy Richard." Jennifer was the daughter from a relationship he had when he was a young lawyer. Her mother, Catherine, was a simple woman who worked as a seamstress. When they separated, Catherine took the girl and disappeared. Richard tried to search for years, but he was never able to find them. "What was your mother's name?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure. Jennifer Johnson, and my father's name was Robert." Richard's world completely collapsed. Jennifer had gotten married, changed her last name, and he never knew. And now he discovered that his daughter had passed away in an accident, and that he had a granddaughter he had never met. "And your grandmother, what is her name?" "Dorothy. Dorothy Johnson. She is my father, Robert's mother." Richard took a deep breath. Dorothy wasn't Jennifer's mother, but her mother-in-law. That explained why he had never been able to find them. Jennifer had gotten married and completely changed her life. The judge rose slowly, his legs unsteady. The company's lawyer protested again, but Richard gestured for him to be quiet. "I need a recess," he declared. "This trial is suspended indefinitely." "But, Your Honor," protested the lawyer, "this is irregular." "Silence," shouted Richard, losing his composure for the first time in decades of his career. "I said the trial is suspended." Amanda didn't understand what was happening. Had she done something wrong by showing the pendant? The judge seemed deeply upset. "Your Honor, did I do something wrong?" she asked timidly. Richard looked at her with tear-filled eyes. How could he explain that she was his granddaughter? How could he tell her that he had spent over 20 years searching for his daughter and now discovered it was too late? "Amanda," he said softly, "I need you to come with me to my chambers. We have a lot to talk about." The company's lawyer was outraged. "This is an irregularity. I will file an appeal. I demand the trial continue." "Do as you wish," Richard replied, without even looking at him. "Bailiff, please escort Mrs. Johnson to my chambers." In the private chambers, Richard sat down heavily in his chair. Amanda remained standing, confused and frightened. The silence stretched for several minutes as he tried to find the right words. "Amanda, I'm going to ask a question that might seem strange, but I need to know. Did your mother ever talk about her father, about her mother's side of the family?" "No, sir. My grandmother Dorothy always said my mother was very private about the past. I only knew that she raised my mother alone and that she never spoke about the father." Richard took a deep breath. That was it. Jennifer had been raised by her single mother, Catherine, who never told her daughter about him. "Amanda, I need to tell you something that will change your life forever." He paused, fighting back tears. "I am your grandfather." The young woman stood motionless, as if she hadn't understood the words. "What do you mean?" "Your mother, Jennifer, was my daughter. I gave that pendant to her when she was 3 years old. After that, her mother, Catherine, disappeared with her, and I never saw them again." Amanda felt her legs go weak. She leaned on the nearest chair, trying to process the information. "That can't be true," she murmured. "It's too much of a coincidence." Richard stood up and went to a personal file he kept in his chambers. From there, he pulled out an old, yellowed folder. Inside were pictures of Jennifer as a child, a birth certificate, and all the documents from the search he had done years ago. "Look," he said, showing a picture of Jennifer at 3 years old, wearing the pendant. "It's your mother." Amanda took the photo with trembling hands. The resemblance was undeniable. It was the same face she knew from the few photos her grandma Dorothy kept, only much younger. "Why did she never tell me?" asked Amanda, tears streaming down her face. "I believe your mother never knew who I was. Her mother, Catherine, never told her my name. When we separated, Catherine was very angry. We were very young, and the situation wasn't easy." Richard told the whole story. How he met Catherine when he was a young, recently graduated lawyer. How they fell in love, but their social differences and the pressure from his family tore them apart. How Catherine disappeared when she was pregnant, and he only found out about Jennifer's existence months later. "I spent years looking for you," he continued. "I hired detectives, I traveled all over the country. But Catherine had vanished completely. She changed her name, her city, her life. I never imagined that Jennifer had gotten married and changed her last name again." Amanda absorbed every word in silence. Suddenly her whole life made more sense. The sadness she sometimes saw in her mother's eyes when she looked at the pendant. The way her grandma Dorothy spoke of her daughter-in-law with such affection, but always avoided talking about her past. And now she asked, "What does this change?" Richard felt his heart tighten. His daughter was gone, but his granddaughter was there, needing help, and he had the power to help. "Now you are not going to lose your home," he said firmly. I will look into this case personally and very carefully, and I'm going to meet my other grandmother, Dorothy." But Amanda shook her head. "I don't want any favors for being your granddaughter. If the documents aren't good enough, then they aren't good enough. I don't want you to stain your reputation because of me." Richard smiled for the first time in hours. There was the character of his daughter Jennifer, the dignity he had always admired in Catherine. "My dear granddaughter," he said softly, "this isn't about doing a favor. It's about doing justice. And now I am going to investigate this case properly, as I should have done from the beginning." That afternoon, Richard went personally to Brooklyn Heights to meet Dorothy. The 72-year-old woman was bedridden, very frail, but still lucid. When Amanda introduced the judge who was handling the case, the woman had an unexpected reaction. "Judge Richard Miller," she asked in a weak voice. "The name sounds familiar." "Mrs. Dorothy, I am Amanda's grandfather, Jennifer's father." The old woman was silent for a long moment. Then she asked Amanda to fetch a box she kept under the bed. Inside were old letters, photos, and documents that Richard had never seen. "Jennifer always knew," Dorothy said finally. "She told me all about her father shortly before she passed. She said that one day, if something happened to her, I should look for Richard Miller, but I never had the courage." Richard picked up one of the letters. It was from Jennifer herself, written just a few months before the accident. In it, she told about her childhood, about how her mother Catherine had regretted keeping him away, and about how she dreamed that one day he would meet his granddaughter. "She said you were a good man," Dorothy continued, "that her mother had made a mistake by disappearing with her, but when she found out you had become a judge, she was afraid to reach out. She thought you were too important to care about a simple family." Tears streamed freely down Richard's face as he read the words of the daughter he never truly knew. In the following days, Richard dedicated himself to Amanda's case with an attention that surprised everyone. He uncovered serious irregularities in the construction company's documents. The company had falsified part of the documentation, taking advantage of simple families who didn't have the resources to properly defend themselves. But during the investigation, he discovered something even more shocking. The company wasn't acting alone. There was a scheme involving corrupt notary offices and public officials who facilitated the seizure of properties from humble families. Richard found himself facing a complex ethical dilemma. If he exposed the scheme, he could help dozens of families who were going through the same situation as Amanda. But it would also put his own career at risk, as some of those involved were powerful people. Amanda, sensing the weight her grandfather was carrying, had a frank conversation with him. "Grandpa," she had started calling him that naturally, "I don't want you to get hurt because of me. I've already gained more than I ever hoped for by getting to know you." "No, my dear," he replied. "It's not just about you anymore. I've discovered there are dozens of families in the same situation. I can't close my eyes to this. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, who are just starting out. Now back to the story. Richard's investigation uncovered a corruption network involving 3 notary offices, 2 City Hall employees, and 5 construction companies. The scheme had been operating for over 10 years, and hundreds of families had lost their homes unjustly. But confronting this scheme meant confronting very powerful people. Richard received veiled threats, political pressure, and even attempted bribes. Some colleagues advised him not to stir up a hornet's nest and to be content with just resolving Amanda's case. One evening, while having dinner at the simple house in Brooklyn Heights, Richard had become a constant presence there, helping to care for Dorothy. Amanda brought up the subject. "Grandpa, maybe it's better if you stop here. We've already recovered our house. We've gotten to know each other. You don't need to risk any more." Richard looked at his granddaughter, then at Dorothy, who, despite her weakness, still followed the conversations with interest. He thought of Jennifer, the daughter he never knew who had grown up in a simple but honest family. "Amanda," he finally said, "your mother left me a letter where she said she hoped I would be a man she could be proud of. How can I honor her memory if I close my eyes to injustice?" Dorothy smiled from the bed. "Jennifer always said you were a man of character. I think she was right." Richard decided to move forward with the investigation, but in a smart way. Instead of acting alone, he contacted the district attorney's office and the court's disciplinary board. He officially presented all the evidence, legally protecting himself. The scandal exploded in the press. "Judge uncovers major real estate scam in New York" was the headline in the major newspapers. Richard became a national hero, but for him, the real achievement was different. Throughout the whole process, he had grown closer and closer to Amanda and Dorothy. The simple house in Brooklyn Heights had become his refuge. There he wasn't the feared Judge Richard Miller, but simply the grandpa who came over for dinner and helped care for his sick grandmother. Amanda had gone back to school. With a more stable financial situation, Richard had secured fair compensation for all the families harmed by the scheme. She could dedicate herself to the law degree she had always dreamed of. "I want to follow in your footsteps, Grandpa," she said one day. "I want to help people like us." "You already do, my dear," he replied. "You helped me remember why I became a judge." Dorothy, who had improved greatly with the proper medical care Richard provided, became the matriarch of the reunited family. On Sunday afternoons, she would tell stories of Jennifer as a child, filling in the gaps in Richard's life. "Jennifer was stubborn, just like you," she would say, laughing. "Once she made up her mind about something, there was no changing it." Richard discovered that his daughter had graduated in education, worked with underprivileged children, and married for love to Robert, an honest, hard-working mechanic. She had built a simple but happy life, always holding in her heart the hope of one day reuniting with her father. 6 months after their first meeting in court, Richard made a decision that surprised everyone. At 58, he requested early retirement. "I want to spend the time I have left with my family," he explained to the court president. "I've already missed 20 years of my daughter's life. I won't waste any more time away from my granddaughter." On his last day as a judge, Richard insisted that Amanda accompany him to the court. She was finishing her 2nd year of law school and had become his greatest pride. In the same room where they had met, he gave his farewell speech. He spoke about justice, about dignity, about second chances, and about how life sometimes surprises us in the most unexpected moments. "I've learned that being a judge doesn't just mean applying the law," he said. "It means remembering that behind every case there are real people, with real stories, with real pain and real hopes." Amanda was in the audience, along with Dorothy, who had insisted on attending despite her frailty. The two most important women in his life were there, witnessing the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. After the ceremony, the three of them went home. The house in Brooklyn Heights had officially become Richard's home too. He sold his luxury apartment and moved into the room Amanda had prepared for him. "Now we're a complete family," said Dorothy, sitting on the porch in the wheelchair Richard had bought for her. Richard watched the sunset painting the sky orange over the neighborhood rooftops. Beside him, Amanda was studying for her college exams. It was a simple, everyday scene, but one he had waited his whole life to experience. "Grandpa," said Amanda, looking up from her books, "I have a question." "Go ahead." "Why do you think fate wanted us to meet that way? With you being the judge on my case, of all people." Richard smiled, playing with the pendant he now wore on a chain around his neck. Amanda had insisted he keep it. "I think your mother had a hand in it from up above," he replied. "She was always stubborn. She must have been bothered seeing us apart." Dorothy laughed from her wheelchair. "Jennifer always said that things happen when they're meant to, not before, not after." Amanda returned to her studies, but Richard continued watching the street activity. Children played on the sidewalk, neighbors chatted in their windows. The simple life of the neighborhood went on at its own pace. He thought about how his life had completely changed in just a few months. From a lonely, feared judge, he had become a grandfather and part of a family. He had learned that love knows no social differences, that happiness lies in simple things, and that it's never too late to start over. 6 months later, Amanda graduated from law school with honors. Richard was in the front row at the graduation, crying with pride. Dorothy, who had insisted on going despite the doctor's protests, held his hand tightly. "Jennifer would be proud," murmured the old woman. "She is proud," Richard corrected. "I'm sure she's watching everything." After graduation, Amanda made a decision that moved her grandfather. she decided to open a public interest law practice in their own neighborhood to help families going through situations similar to what she had experienced. Richard offered to finance the law office, but she refused. "I want to do it on my own merit, like you taught me. But I accept you being my first client." "First client?" "I want to make your legal adoption as my grandfather official, so that his name appears on the documents officially." The adoption ceremony was simple, held in the same court where they had met. The judge presiding over the ceremony was a colleague of Richard's and made a point of commenting on the beauty of their story. "It's rare to see a story with such a beautiful ending," he said. "You are proof that justice sometimes works in mysterious ways." After the ceremony, the three went to visit the graves of Jennifer and Robert. It was the first time Richard had been there. Amanda had prepared flowers and a letter he had written for his daughter. "Hi, Jennifer," he said, kneeling before the simple headstone. "I came to meet my daughter. I'm sorry it took me so long, but I promise I will take good care of our Amanda and our Dorothy." Amanda held his arm, moved. Dorothy, in her wheelchair, silently dried her tears. "She knows, Grandpa," said Amanda. "She always knew that one day we would find each other." 1 year after their first meeting, Richard was again in a courtroom, but this time as a proud spectator. Amanda was arguing her first major case, a family who was losing their home to a construction company, in a situation very similar to what she had experienced. She spoke with passion about justice, about dignity, about the right of ordinary people to have their rights respected. Richard recognized his own rhetoric in her words, but with the sensitivity and care that only someone who had been through the situation could have. The family won the case. When Amanda left the courthouse, Richard was waiting for her with a bouquet of flowers. "Congratulations, counselor," he said, using the title with pride. "I learned from the best," she replied, hugging her grandfather. That evening, the three had dinner at home as they always did. Dorothy, who despite her advanced age was still the center of attention and family decisions, made a toast. "To Jennifer, who brought us together, and to the pendant, which made it all possible." Richard raised his glass, looking at the two women who had transformed his life. "To the family I thought I had lost forever, and which was returned to me when I needed it most." Amanda added, "And to the miracles that happen when we least expect them." Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. 2 years had passed since that first meeting in the courtroom. The family's life had settled into a happy and peaceful routine. Richard had completely adapted to life in the neighborhood, becoming known to all the neighbors as Mr. Richard, Counselor Amanda's grandfather. Amanda's law practice was thriving. She had specialized in real estate law and become a leading voice in defending humble families against large construction companies. Often, Richard would help her with advice and experience, proud to see how she applied justice with wisdom and heart. Dorothy continued to be the family matriarch. Despite being 84 and having physical limitations, her mind remained sharp, and she was the one who made the important decisions for the household. Richard had learned to respect and love her, like the mother he never really had the chance to know. One Sunday morning, as they were having coffee on the porch, Dorothy made a comment that surprised them both. "You know, Richard, I have a confession to make." "What is it, Mrs. Dorothy?" "I always knew who you were." Richard and Amanda looked at each other, confused. "What do you mean, Grandma?" asked Amanda. "Jennifer told me about you years before the accident. She showed me newspaper photos from when you became a judge. She said she was proud of her father, even though she never really got to know him. And she made me promise that if anything ever happened to her, I should take Amanda to meet her grandfather." Richard fell silent, processing the information. "So why did you never look for me?" "Because I was afraid," admitted Dorothy. "You were an important, respected judge. I was just a poor old woman raising a granddaughter. I thought you wouldn't want to get involved with our simple life." "But what about the pendant? Why didn't you tell me this that day?" Dorothy smiled slyly. "Because I wanted you to discover each other naturally. If I had just told you right away, you might have thought Amanda was trying to take advantage of the situation. The way it happened, you got to know each other for real without any masks." Amanda shook her head, laughing. "Grandma, you are a manipulator." "I'm a grandmother who wants the best for her granddaughter," corrected Dorothy, "and who wanted to give Richard the chance to know the family he had lost." Richard stood up and kissed Dorothy's forehead. "Thank you," he said simply, "for taking care of my granddaughter, for keeping Jennifer's memory alive, and for orchestrating our reunion." "I didn't orchestrate it," she said. "Jennifer did. She always said she would find a way for you to meet." That same Sunday, Richard had an idea. He called Amanda for a private talk in his room. "Amanda, I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" "How about we expand the practice? Open a second location in the central area?" Amanda was surprised. "Grandpa, that would be very expensive, and I'm still just getting started. I have the money from the sale of my apartment sitting in the bank. Besides, I have contacts who can help. I'm thinking we could form a partnership." "A partnership?" "Richard and Amanda Johnson Miller, public interest law," he said, smiling. "What do you think?" Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that for me?" "I wouldn't do it for you. I would do it with you. We are a family. We are a team." The proposal came to fruition 6 months later. The new office was inaugurated in a commercial building in downtown New York, but it maintained the same purpose: to offer quality legal services to people who couldn't afford high fees. Richard, even though retired, obtained special permission to work as a legal consultant for the practice. His experience as a judge was invaluable in guiding the most complex cases. The inauguration was an emotional event. Present were Richard's colleagues from the judiciary, Amanda's clients, neighbors from the area, and dozens of families who had been helped by the scheme Richard had uncovered years before. During the inauguration speech, Amanda publicly told the story of how they met. "This office exists thanks to a pendant," she said, showing the jewel she now wore on a chain. A pendant that brought together two people who needed each other, but didn't know it. In the audience, Dorothy watched from her wheelchair, beaming with pride. At 85 years old, she had managed to see the family reunited and thriving. After the ceremony, the three of them went home as they always did. It was a tradition Richard had insisted on maintaining. No matter what happened during the day, they would always have dinner together at home. "Grandma," said Amanda while preparing Dorothy's tea, "sometimes I think we're a strange kind of family. A lawyer, a retired former judge, and an 85-year-old lady sharing a small house in Brooklyn Heights." "You don't choose family based on what seems normal," replied Dorothy. "You choose it based on the love that exists between people." Richard added, "and based on what we're willing to do for each other." That night, after Dorothy went to sleep, Richard and Amanda stayed on the porch talking, as they did every night. It was the time when they planned the next day, discussed cases from the law firm, or simply enjoyed each other's company. "Grandpa, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Do you regret anything?" Richard thought for a moment. "I regret not insisting more on looking for your mother. I regret letting my pride stop me from trying to find you sooner, but I don't regret anything that happened after we met." "Not even leaving your career as a judge?" "Especially that," he answered without hesitation. "I discovered there are things more important than a brilliant career. There's family, there's love, there's purpose." Amanda held his hand. "I love you, Grandpa." "I love you too, my dear granddaughter." The pendant hanging around Amanda's neck shone softly under the porch light as if approving of the conversation. It had become the symbol of the reunited family, proof that love can overcome any distance or lost time. 3 years after their first meeting, Richard woke up on a Saturday morning with a strange feeling. Dorothy hadn't come down for breakfast, which was unusual for her as she always woke up early. When he went to check on her, he found the elderly woman still sleeping, but her breathing was different. He called Amanda and they rushed to the hospital. The doctors were clear. Dorothy was passing away peacefully without pain, but it was a matter of hours. In the ICU, the three said their goodbyes. Dorothy, even weak, made a point of giving her final guidance. "Richard," she said in a faint voice, "keep being the father that Jennifer always wanted to have. Amanda," she continued, "keep pursuing justice with your heart. Never lose your compassion. And you two," she concluded, "keep being a family. That's what Jennifer wanted." Dorothy passed away that Saturday afternoon, holding the hands of Richard and Amanda. Her last minutes were surrounded by the love of the two people she had brought together. The wake was simple, as she had requested, but the small chapel was packed. Neighbors from the area, clients from the law firm, Richard's colleagues from the judiciary, all came to pay their last respects to the matriarch who had reunited a family. During the wake, an elderly lady approached Richard. "Are you Richard Miller?" "Yes, ma'am." "I am Catherine Johnson." Richard felt the world stop. It was Jennifer's mother, his first girlfriend, Amanda's maternal grandmother. A woman of 82 with white hair but with the same expressive eyes, he remembered. "Catherine," he murmured, "you came." "Dorothy contacted me a few months ago. She told me you had found each other. She said I should come to say goodbye to her and to meet my great-granddaughter." Amanda approached, curious. "Grandma Catherine? Mommy's mother?" "Yes, my dear. Your other grandmother." The reunion was emotional. Catherine apologized to Richard for the lost years, explaining that she had acted out of fear and immaturity when she was young. Richard, in turn, acknowledged his own mistakes and the social pressure that had contributed to their separation. "Jennifer always wanted you to reconcile," said Catherine. "Dorothy told me she had spoken about it before she passed away." After Dorothy's funeral, Catherine stayed for a few days at the house in Brooklyn Heights. It was a period of healing and reconciliation. Amanda's two grandmothers were finally able to talk about Jennifer, exchange memories, and fill in the gaps in the family history. "Jennifer looked more like me physically," said Catherine, "but she had her father's character. She was always fair, always stood up for the weaker ones." Richard smiled. "Just like Amanda." "Just like Amanda," confirmed Catherine. When it was time for Catherine to return to her hometown, she made a request. "I would like to come here from time to time, to get to know my great-granddaughter better and to try to be friends again, Richard." "You will always be welcome," he replied. "We are family now." With Dorothy's passing, Richard and Amanda had to adapt to the new reality. The house grew quieter, the meals more introspective, but the matriarch's legacy remained alive in every conversation, in every decision, in every show of love between grandfather and granddaughter. 6 months after Dorothy's passing, Amanda made an important decision. "Grandpa, I want to have children." Richard looked up from his newspaper, surprised. "Children? But you're not even dating anyone." "Not yet," she said, smiling, "but I want to start a family. I want the love that exists between us to continue for future generations." "And how do you plan to do that?" "The traditional way," she replied, laughing. "I'm going to find someone special, get married, and give you and Grandma Catherine great-grandchildren." Richard laughed too. "And do you have someone in mind already?" "Actually, I do," she admitted, blushing slightly. "There's a colleague from the Bar Association who has been asking me out for months. I always said no because I was so busy with the law firm and taking care of Grandma Dorothy. But maybe it's time to give him a chance." "What's his name?" "Michael Williams, S.K. He's a labor lawyer. He's 30. He's a good person." Richard made a protective, paternal face. "I'll want to meet this Michael before I give my approval." "Grandpa," protested Amanda, laughing, "you'll scare him off." "It's my duty as a grandfather," he said solemnly. "Besides, I need to be sure he's worthy of my granddaughter." Amanda and Michael started dating a few months later. Richard subjected him to a real interrogation during the first dinner at home, but ended up approving of the young man. Michael was from a simple family from the countryside, had gotten his law degree on his own merit, and showed genuine affection and respect for Amanda. "He reminds me of me at your age," Richard confided to Catherine during one of her visits. "Ambitious, but with good principles." "And her? Is she happy?" "Very happy," replied Richard. "I haven't seen her smile like that in months." The engagement happened 2 years later in a simple ceremony in the backyard. Richard officiated the ceremony, using his prerogative as a former judge. Catherine was present, as were neighbors and friends who had become family over the years. During the ceremony, Amanda wore the pendant that had united the family. In her speech, she told the story again. "This pendant brought me to my grandfather. My grandfather brought me to a family, and that family taught me that love is the most powerful force in the world." Michael, in his speech, thanked Richard especially. "Mr. Richard, thank you for raising such a special woman and for welcoming me into your family." The party was simple but joyful. The neighbors contributed food, a musician friend of Michael's played guitar, and everyone danced on the porch until the late hours. At the end of the night, when everyone had left, Richard sat alone on the porch, looking at the stars. Catherine approached and sat beside him. "What are you thinking about?" "About Jennifer," he replied. "About how happy she would be to see our granddaughter getting married." "She is watching," Catherine said softly. "I'm sure she is." "Do you think we did the right thing, in reconnecting after so long?" "I think we did what had to be done," she replied. "We made many mistakes when we were young, but we got it right in the end." Richard held her hand for the first time in over 40 years. "Thank you for raising Jennifer alone. I know it wasn't easy." "Thank you for giving her the values that she passed on to Amanda," replied Catherine. "In the end, we raised a good daughter together, even though we were apart." 1 year after the wedding, Amanda announced her first pregnancy. Richard was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a great-grandfather. He attended every doctor's appointment, helped prepare the baby's room, and read every pregnancy book he could find. "Grandpa, you're more anxious than I am," Amanda would joke. "It's my first great-grandchild," he would defend himself. "I have a right to be nervous." During the pregnancy, Richard developed the habit of talking to Amanda's belly every night. "Hi, little one, this is your great-grandfather speaking. I can't wait to meet you and tell you all about your great-grandmother Jennifer, whom you'll never meet in person, but whom you will love very much." The baby was born on a sunny spring morning. It was a girl who was named Jennifer Dorothy Johnson Williams, honoring the two family matriarchs. When Richard held his great-granddaughter for the first time, he cried as he hadn't cried since the day he met Amanda. In those tiny arms, he saw the continuation of the lineage, the certainty that the family's love would continue for generations to come. "Hi, Jennifer Dorothy," he whispered. "Welcome to our crazy family." Little Jennifer became the center of attention in the house. Richard proved to be a most dedicated great-grandfather, waking up in the middle of the night to help with feedings, teaching lullabies he had learned for Jennifer's mother, and documenting every moment of the girl's life. Amanda watched her grandfather's dedication with emotion. "Grandpa, you're being the great-grandfather you never got to be a grandfather for me." "I'm being the great-grandfather your mother would have wanted me to be," he corrected her. With the birth of little Jennifer, the house in Brooklyn Heights became too small. Richard suggested moving to a bigger house, but Amanda resisted. "This house is our history, Grandpa. It's here that we truly got to know each other. It's here that Grandma Dorothy spent her last happy years. I can't abandon this place." Richard understood, and together they renovated the house, expanding it while keeping its original charm. They built a second floor, a larger garden, but preserved the porch where so many important conversations had taken place. Little Jennifer grew up surrounded by love. She had 4 doting grandparents, Richard, Catherine, and Michael's parents, who had moved to New York to be closer to their granddaughter. The house was always full of visitors, laughter, and stories. When the girl turned 2, she started calling Richard Grandpa Richie and developed a habit of playing with the pendant he wore around his neck. "Grandpa Richie, what's this?" she would ask, pointing to the jewel. "It's the most important thing in our family," he would answer. "One day, when you're older, I'll tell you the whole story." Richard remained active at the office, now renamed Richard and Amanda Johnson Miller, Public Interest and Family Law. At 70 years old, he kept a sharp mind and his passion for justice intact. Amanda had become one of the most respected family law attorneys in New York. She often took on cases similar to the one she had lived through, humble families being wronged by powerful people, and in each case, she remembered the importance of fighting for the underdog. One afternoon, while playing with his great-granddaughter in the garden, Richard received an unexpected call. It was from the presiding judge of the New York Supreme Court. "Richard, we have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" "We want to create a specialized court for family and housing disputes. It would be specifically for cases like the ones you helped resolve years ago. We'd like you to coordinate the project as a special consultant." Richard looked at his great-granddaughter playing in the garden, at Amanda, who had just arrived from work and was kissing her daughter, at the house that had become his safe harbor. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But it would be an opportunity to institutionalize everything you've learned over these years." That night, during dinner, Richard shared the proposal with the family. "What do you all think?" Michael was the first to speak up. "It would be an incredible opportunity to help more families." Amanda agreed. "Grandpa, you could use all your experience to create something bigger." Catherine, who was spending a few days with them, added, "Jennifer would be so proud to see you using everything you learned to help other people." Richard accepted the proposal. The new court was inaugurated a year later, with a ceremony attended by officials and, most importantly, dozens of families who had been helped over the years. During the inauguration speech, Richard told his own story. "This court exists because 5 years ago, a humble young woman had the courage to show a pendant to a stern judge. Sometimes justice happens in ways we don't expect. Sometimes it needs a human touch to work properly." In the audience, Amanda held little Jennifer in her lap. The little girl played with the very pendant that had brought the family together, unaware she was holding a piece of her family's history. After the ceremony, the 4 generations of the family gathered at home to celebrate: Catherine, Richard, Amanda, and Michael, and little Jennifer. "A toast," said Richard, raising his glass, "to the family that fate separated and love brought back together." "To Jennifer, who is watching all of this from somewhere," added Catherine. "To Grandma Dorothy, who engineered our reunion," said Amanda. "And to little Jennifer, who represents our future," Michael concluded. Little Jennifer, without understanding the meaning of the moment, clapped her little hands, making everyone laugh. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Richard went out to the balcony, as he had done every night for years. It was his moment for reflection, for gratitude, for a silent conversation with his daughter Jennifer. He looked at the stars and held the pendant. "Jennifer, my daughter," he whispered, "we did it. We're a real family now. Your daughter has become an amazing woman, married a good man, and given me a wonderful great-granddaughter. And more importantly, she learned to use the law to help people just as you would have done." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the tree in the garden, as if in response. "Thank you for leaving the pendant with Amanda," he continued. "Thank you for planning our reunion through Grandma Dorothy. Thank you for giving me a second chance to be a father. And now, a grandfather and great-grandfather." Richard closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, felt completely at peace. He had found his family, fulfilled his purpose, and left a legacy. Little Jennifer would grow up surrounded by love, knowing her story, proud of her roots. The pendant shone softly on his chest, reflecting the moonlight. It was no longer just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of a united family, of second chances, of a love that overcomes any obstacle. End of story. So, dear listener, what did you think of this touching story about family, forgiveness, and second chances? Tell us in the comments if you've ever been in a similar situation, or if you know someone who was reunited with their family after a long time. Leave a like to show you enjoyed the story, and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one.